it's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming to think about because this busy slide is only partially representative of all the different sources of these endocrine disruptive chemicals. They're in the water, as just discussed. They're in our cosmetics. They're in canned and the pesticides used on conventional foods. They're in our feminine hygiene products. They're in our hair care products. And they've been identified in our fast foods and our ultra processed foods. One of the reasons that this is germane to Black women, it's that it's well documented that Black women have the largest market share in terms of hair care products. And when they look at the use of fast food restaurants, Black women among women have the highest rate of going to a fast food, which means that there is the real possibility that Black women are being exposed to a disproportionate amount of these EDCs. And why that's important, I'll try to tie this all together in a little bit. In terms of the fast food, we know that over $200 billion is spent on fast foods in a year in the United States. We like our fast foods. 80% say that they've gone to at least one fast food outlet, and the number one being McDonald's, at least once a month. 20% say they've eaten fast food or they eat fast food at least once a week. 23% say that they have it at least 3 or more times per week, and lunch seems to be the most popular time. And 34% of children say that they are eating fast foods on a daily basis. Which brings me to that second component, which is ultra-processed foods. And I have to go back in terms of just giving a little history. Ultra-processed foods is part of a food classification system. The NOVA food classification has 4 groups, and the 4th group is ultra-processed foods. As a background, I should say that this NOVA food classification system was developed in Brazil. Brazil is a developing country, but they realized that the main diseases affecting Brazilians were no longer acute, like infection, but chronic, like hypertension and diabetes. And the Ministry of Health developed a new food classification along with guidelines to give to Brazilians to help to improve the health of the country. And this new food classification system was called NOVA. And as stated before, it divides the foods into 4 distinct categories, not determined by nutrients or not determined by calories, but rather determined based on the amount of food processing that was required in order to get that particular food item. So briefly, the 4 groups. Group 1, unprocessed or minimally processed foods. Something like that would be a fruit or vegetable taken from a garden, or nuts without seeds, or dried or fresh herbs. Examples of unprocessed or minimally processed foods. Group 2 are what are called processed culinary ingredients. There are things like olive oil, which is derived from olives, or salt, which is extracted. And these ingredients are then added to the processed foods. Processed foods, I'm sorry, let me back that up. I think that wasn't absolutely clear. So group 1, unprocessed or minimally processed foods. Group 2 is really talking about culinary ingredients, which are extracted from natural foods like olive oil or syrup from a maple tree. And these ingredients are often used in homes and restaurants to season our foods and to create that variety of ethnic foods that we can all appreciate. Group 3 are processed foods that are manufactured by an industry that are then incorporated into foods in group 1 and group 2. And examples of processed foods in group 3 would be something like canned tuna fish or tomato paste or a fruit in a sugar syrup. And this is produced by an industry, but it is food that uses 1 or 2 ingredients as opposed to what we call the ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are basically concoctions or formulations that take extracts from foods and they take food constituents and they put them together to create a number of products. And these products are have added ingredients like emulsifiers and other ingredients, food colors and flavors are added to this. And it's a multi-step process. Ultra-processed foods are not something that you can make at home. For instance, you can take a potato and you can make French fries, but you can't make a Dorito in your kitchen. This is an example of an ultra-processed food. So a lot of the carbonated soft drinks, or all of the carbonated soft drinks, the energy drinks, the sports drinks, the sweetened juices, the fish sticks, the nuggets, the hot dogs, these are ultra-processed foods. And so the Brazilian government created this food system, and their golden rule to their citizens was always prefer natural or minimally processed foods and freshly made dishes and meals, and avoid ultra-processed foods. Now, what I like about that is it's simple. It's simple. It's easy to remember. You want to avoid ultra-processed foods, and you want to focus on the natural and minimally processed. So in this diagram, you can see examples of what might be considered processed, and also what might be considered ultra-processed foods. I'm contrasting that with the dietary guidelines for Americans for 2020 to 2025. And there were several key steps that were advised, and they were that Americans should follow a healthy dietary pattern at every stage of life, that we should customize and enjoy nutrient-dense food and beverage choices to reflect personal preferences and cultural traditions, along with budgetary considerations. We should focus on meeting food group needs with nutrient-dense foods and beverages and stay within calorie limits, and that we should limit foods and beverages higher in added sugars, saturated fat, sodium, and limit alcohol beverages. There is no distinct reference to ultra-processed foods. So here's yet another way to tell if it's an ultra-processed food. Look at the ingredients. The saying, "I bet you can't eat just one," is very real because these foods are manufactured in such a way as to be cheap, very tasty, convenient, have a long shelf life, and be ready to eat, meaning there's minimal preparation required on your part for this to have this food. They also, it's because it's easy and rarely available and you don't really have to do it, you can eat these things while watching TV or being distracted on a phone. So you don't even appreciate how much you're actually eating. So the question is, these foods are cheap often, and that's a really important point when you're talking up to women in the workforce who may not be making as much money as men, but that need to feed families. The ability of it being cheap, readily accessible, minimal preparation, long shelf life are all appealing characteristics. But unfortunately, there's a lot of sugar in this, and we know that sugar has been associated with many negatives such as weight gain, obesity, diabetes, elevated triglyceride levels, hypertension, heart disease. We know that. And so there have been studies that have shown that in this country, the top 3 ultra-processed foods are breads, cakes, cookies, and pies are grouped together, and salty snacks. Now, of these ultra-processed foods, the foods that have the highest sugar content are the carbonated soft drinks, the fruit flavor, pre-sweetened tea, coffee, energy, sports drinks, and the cakes, pies, and cookies. We know that in the United States, it's been said that almost 90%, 89.7% of the added sugars that we eat come from ultra-processed foods.